Convicted for being Christian. Sentencing day for an American pastor locked up in Iran. The father of two facing the person in the country known as the hanging judge. Now we know his fate. Punished for doing God's work. Thrown in a notorious prison for months by one of the most brutal regimes on earth, only to receive a judgment not based on justice, but on vengeance. In minutes, new reaction from the people still fighting to win his freedom. What comes next? I'm Harris Faulkner. We begin tonight with an American pastor being held prisoner for months now in Iran, convicted for being Christian. His fate decided by the man whom Iranians call the hanging judge. 8 years in that country's most dangerous and notorious prison, his sentence. 34-year-old Saeed Abedini, a loving husband and father of two, has been locked up inside Iran since September. He denies the charges, which were not even made public until last week, and says he simply went to Iran to set up an orphanage. The State Department speaking out about the conviction today, saying, quote, "We condemn Iran's continued violation of the universal right of freedom of religion, and we call on the Iranian authorities to respect Mr. Abedini's rights and release him." I'm Harris Faulkner. This is the Fox Report. It's the bottom of the hour. Time now for the top of the news. An American pastor jailed for months in Iran has just been convicted of being Christian. An Iranian judge known as the, quote, hanging judge just today sentenced the pastor, Saeed Abedini, to 8 years in Iran's most dangerous prison. And this was sudden. We'd learned he'd only been charged last week. The news, a crippling blow to his family. As you might imagine, they've been trying to win his freedom for months now. Joining me now is Jordan Seculo, the attorney for Pastor Abedini's family. He's also the executive director of the American Center for Law and Justice. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me here.
Well, Jordan, based on the past, Iran has shown that it can be cruel. Hostages, prisoners, not treated well in that country. Afraid to say it, is this a death sentence for this pastor?
You know, I said it earlier, and it will be if we don't keep working, if we don't keep speaking out, if we don't keep telling his story. Iran is extremely defiant here, and I wanted to highlight something that just to make that clear. Usually when they go after anybody because they're a Christian or a convert, they don't say that. But the Iranian state media today, which was in that courtroom, this other surprise trial, where they announced his sentence and his, well, the conviction and sentence in less than a week, as you said, they put in their own article. I mean, we sent it out in Farsi, and they say his crime and what he was convicted of was intentional attempt to undermine the national security of the Iranian government by being involved in house churches from 2001 to 2005. And so this is really old information as well. He's been back 9 times, and more than that since 2005. So again, shocking to him, shocking to the family, but we knew there would be some sort of conviction at some point. And we just wish this lawyer had at least some information. He's shocked as well.
Where is the pastor tonight?
The pastor is in a new ward of Evin prison. This is one of the toughest prisons in the world, and especially inside of Iran. People don't survive there. I keep telling the story. In October, there was a blogger arrested, a political blogger. And by the way, Pastor Saeed, not involved in politics, not a dissident, not trying to make a story. He was actually going there to get bureaucratic sign-off, following the rules on his orphanage. We've talked about that before on Fox. So here he is at this prison. A blogger got arrested October 30th. He was dead November 3rd because of interrogations. He had no trial. So every day, and Nagme, Pastor Saeed's wife, has said that he survives that prison is a miracle in itself. They give out pain medicine, Harris, and they won't give it to him because he's unclean. He's a Christian. So that's how bad they're beating their prisoners. 8 years, it is a death sentence.
And I want to cut in because I want to cover some more ground if I can now and really go there with you about how they have harmed him. You talk about pain medicine. He actually, as far as you know, really needs it.
He's been being beaten and tortured. He's been very clear. He was brave. He was able to dictate a letter to one of the family members during a visitation a few weeks ago when he made it very clear how bad the suffering was. Days, it's the classic torture. And imagine if you're him now tonight and you're thinking, well, it's not just 4 months. Now I've got to do 8 years. And he knows Iran. He was born there. In Iran, 8 years becomes 16 years very quickly. And so They beat him one day, they treat him nice the next day, they tell him he's going to hang one day. It's typical. It's really bad abuse. People get killed. You know, we didn't highlight that as much until today because we wanted to, remain strong. But I think people need to know 8 years, very serious, beatings, unconsciousness, the list goes on.
Man, so tough to hear this, Jordan. Can you or his family, can anybody see him at this point? Is there any way to get messages to him to let him know that people care?
Tomorrow will be key. The family was able to confirm his new location yesterday. The visitations are allowed on Monday. Now, what'll be interesting is, does his conviction change that? The attorney did see him today, but the attorney had no idea he was walking into court. It was actually Naghmeh, Pastor Saeed's wife, who told the attorney, I think you need to go to the court tomorrow. He showed up, and there's all the Iranian state media, government press, and Pastor Saeed sitting there in front of the judge. So again, he did see him. It's not a good situation. I want to make that clear.
Okay.
But we fight on, and this is not over at all.
Jordan, this is not happening also in a vacuum. Iran has taken American hostages, I was telling viewers earlier in the newscast, 1979. Also the American journalist in 2009, Roxana Saberi, who was also sentenced to 8 years in prison after being convicted of what they called spying. Eventually, though, they let her go. She forged a hunger strike. Then the 3 hikers who were held for more than a year finally freed. What is Pastor Abedini's best shot at freedom at this point?
Well, thankfully, by Friday, we've been working with his family since he was pulled off a bus and put under house arrest in July. So it took 6 months, and he's been in jail 4 months since September. And the State Department finally just didn't acknowledge him, but called for his release and condemned Iran. So did Jay Carney at the White House. We've had a very tough time getting the State Department to even issue that statement. I mean, it took months and months and being on television. And of course, now that the statement's out there, we're going to go back to the people we work with who are not the spokespeople and say, okay, Jay Carney at the White House, the president's press secretary, thinks you're doing your job. Let's start doing it. How about America lead on this? What does that mean? All it means is encouraging other countries that do have diplomatic relations with Iran to tell them this is serious. You need to let this guy go. You're putting our trade, our business in danger. Countries like Brazil, we worked on Pastor Youssef's case. The vice president there got very involved. He got involved, though, because the U.S. said it's a good thing to get involved here. This is an American. They need to know from the American government that it's the right thing to do. We're getting there, but the State Department can do that. It doesn't have to be public, but at least tell us. Right now, they've been telling us they're not doing anything.
Jordan, you said a mouthful there. How about America take the lead on this? Those are the words that will stick. And it sounds like a role for Americans across the country maybe to contact their local leadership, their elected leaders, and let them know how they feel as a country, how we feel as a country.
Absolutely. You know, we had 49 members of Congress call on Secretary of State Clinton and the State Department to do more. That letter went out just 4 days before they finally issued the statement. The media coverage, sharing the story with your friends from Fox News, sharing the interviews, praying about it at church. It doesn't matter what your politics are, what your faith is. It's a man who just wants to get back to an American citizen who wants to get back to his wife and his 6-year-old daughter and his 4-year-old son. It's going to take a world outcry, but our government can't just issue statements. They've got to lead. He's an American. It's an embarrassment if we're not at least the ones encouraging those who can do it to get the job done. And there's plenty of allies that we've got that have much better relationships with Iran than we do.
Jordan Seculo, the representative for the Abedini family tonight, if there is a website or a Twitter page, we will connect with you during the commercial break. I'll tweet it out. Keep us posted, as I know you will, on what happens. Hopefully he comes home safe very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't lose hope, folks, and thank you for covering this, Harris.
Sure.